so I'm going to show you how to make a pass-through object. Basically, this is two objects that when they're combined, they make one object and they can pass through each other. This is going to be a cone pass-through object. So I bring out a box, set that right in the middle of my work plane, and I need to change some of these dimensions. The radius, I'm going to make 1, so that kind of rounds these edges a little bit. Then I'm going to leave the steps at 10. The length I'm going to put at 2. The width I'm going to leave at 20, and the height I'm going to put at 2 as well. So now I have this kind of little hot dog looking shape here. And now what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to duplicate this shape by hitting Control D, and then I'm going to need to lift it up 1/10 of a millimeter. To do that, I go down to my snap grid and I change my snap grid to 0.1 millimeters. That's 1/10 of a millimeter. And then I hit Control and up, and that lifts that object up by the amount that snap grid is there. So 1/10 of a millimeter. Now I need to rotate this 1 degree. So I rotate it 1 degree and I'm good there. And then I'm going to continue to duplicate this until I have 181 of these. So I continue to duplicate it. You're going to see it's going to kind of spiral up, and I want to let it spiral up until it passes this point at the top. That will give me 181, at least 181 of these. Now it takes a little while. I'm going to speed up the video so it's not going to look very long on my end, but I'm just letting you know it doesn't go super fast. So to do this, I just hold in Control D. Alright, so this looks like I made it there. I'm going to go to my top view, and I'm going to put a box around these just to see how many I have. So I have 183, which means I need to delete down to 181. So I take this top one, delete. Now I should be 182. Let's see, it says there I have 182 shapes, so I need to delete just the top one. Now, since this is so many shapes, what I want to do is I want to save this as a single shape. So to do that, I go to Your Creations and I pick Create Shape. I have all 181 of these selected, and I click on Create Shape, and then I'm going to call it, so I'll just show you what it looks like. I'm going to call it Twisty Shape. Twisty Shape, and then you can hit Save Shape. Now I already have one of these saved, so I'm not going to do it again. I'm just letting you know that this takes a little bit of time too. So after you hit Save Shape, you're going to have to wait until you see it pop up on your Save Shape area. So it will turn into a box first, then you'll see what it actually looks like. So I'm going to cancel this, but you can see there's mine right here. This is my twisty shape right there. So it is that same exact shape, but rather than being 181 parts, this here's only 1. So I need a twisty shape, and I also need a twisty hole. So since I already saved this, I can actually delete this whole thing because I can just drag a new one out with that there. But I'm going to want to go back to my basic shapes, and I'm going to do a very similar thing, but this time it's going to be a hole. So I'm going to bring out my hole box and follow the same, or I should say very similar steps. My radius on this one is going to be 1 1/10, 1.1. So once again, that just kind of rounds those edges a little bit for me. The length is going to be slightly longer, 2 2/10, or 2.2. My width, I'm going to add 2/10 onto that as well, so 20.2, 20 2/10. And my height is going to be 2.2 as well, 2 2/10. So this is a little bit larger than the previous one that I made, but I'm going to be doing the same thing to it here. I'm going to raise it by that same 1/10 of a millimeter. So I duplicate, Control D, and I hit Control up to raise it by that 1/10 of a millimeter, which my snap grid is already set at, right there, that 1/10 of a millimeter. And then I rotate it the same 1 degree. And once again, after I've done both of those things to it, I duplicate it until I get 181 of these. So I'm going to hold in Control D until it goes all the way up and past where I started. And I'm going to look at it from the top view. I definitely went past that beginning point. Let's see how many I have. I have 194 total, so I need to delete down quite a few. Delete, 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 delete. What am I at now? 186, so I need to delete 5 more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now I'm right at 181. If I accidentally deleted too many, I could do Control Z to bring them back. So right now I have 181 parts there, and I'm going to do the same exact thing with this twisty, only I'm going to call it a twisty hole. So I go to my creations and I say create shape, and I save that shape as twisty hole, and I hit save shape. Now I'm not going to do this because I already saved a twisty hole, and so here's my twisty shape. Here's my twisty hole. I'm going to bring both of those out here in a little bit. So notice this one here, 181 parts. I'm going to delete them because I don't want that many pieces. So I'm going to bring out my twisty shape, set it right up here. I'm going to bring out my twisty hole, and I'm going to set that right up here. Now, my twisty hole is a solid right now, so I need to turn that into a hole. My twisty hole is also slightly larger than my twisty shape because it needs to be a little bit larger so it can pass through when it's all finished, when it's all complete. Now these next steps, I'm going to do the same thing to each one. So whatever I do to my twisty solid, I'm going to do the exact same thing to my twisty shape, and I'll just speed those up and go through those really fast so the video is shorter, but you'll do these same exact things. So I'm going to zoom in on my twisty shape, and I'm going to raise the height of it. I'm going to triple its size. So what I'm going to do there is I'm going to increase its height by 300%. So if you double something in size, it's 200%. If you triple something in size, it's 300%. So to do that, I just type in 300 and then put percent, and I hit enter. Now that's 3 times as big. So now, once again, notice I have one shape here, not all the shapes that I used to have. So I'm not dealing with 181 shapes, I'm dealing with just that one, and that's why we create our own shapes. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this one shape, and I'm going to rotate it 45 degrees. Now to do that, I go right inside here. If I keep it inside, it gives me exactly 45. Out here, I can go by 1 degree increments, but in here I go by 22.5 degree increments. So right there is 45 degrees. And then I do this until I have 4 parts. So there I have 2. If I hit Control D again, I have 3. And if I hit Control D again, I have 4. So I have 4 parts there in this twisty solid. So now, I like to do this, you don't need to, but I'm going to group these together, group them, and now I do the same exact thing with my twisty solid. And this will be sped up, but I do the same exact thing. Is a little bit bigger. I'm going to group those together as well and make sure it's a hole. Actually, I'll leave them ungrouped because it seems when I group them, it for whatever turns into a hole. So I have my twisty hole and I have my twisty shape. So I'm going to take my twisty hole and I'm going to move it down 4.9. So it's going to be negative 4.99. And I'm going to do the same thing with my twisty shape. I'm going to move that down negative 4.99. Now I'm going to bring out I'm going to go back to my basic shapes, bring out a cone, and this cone needs to be top radius of 1.55, a base radius of 12.5, and a height of 52 with 36 sides. This just makes it more round. See, with its 3, it's only 3 sides. 36 is going to give it a rounder base, a rounder shape. And then I'm going to need to make this top of this cone rounded. So to do that, I'm going to bring out a half sphere, and that half sphere is going to be 4 by 4. So I'm going to make this 4. I'm going to make this 4, and I'm going to make the height 2. And I'm going to turn that into a hole and I'm going to bring out a rectangle, and that rectangle is going to be 10 by 10. And I'll leave it the 20 high, it doesn't really matter. But I'm going to select both of those, and I want to align them. So go to my align tool, and I'll put them both center and center. So now that half sphere hole is right in the middle of this. So when I group these two objects, make sure there's 2 there. When I group these 2 objects, now I have that hole right there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this whole shape, this entire shape, a hole, and I'm going to match it up with the top of my rectangle. So this hole needs to be 5.11 off the ground. So this here is 52 tall. This is going to be 50.11. So 50.11 off the ground. And now I'm going to hold in Shift and select this. So now my cone and this hole that's going to make a kind of a half cylinder are connected. I'm going to line them up. So I'm going to line them up on this one. So I click this one, I click the cone, center, and center, and now it's right on the top of that. So at this point I can group these 2 objects that I have selected. Let me zoom in on it a little bit better, just so you can see what happens when I group them. So when I group it, now rather than having that flat top, now I have a nice rounded top of the cone. So I have a nice rounded top of the cone there. So I'm going to take this same cone here and I'm going to duplicate this cone. So Control D, and I'm just going to hit Shift and move it to the right. by using the right arrow, slide that over here. So I have this cone here that I'm going to match up with this to create the solid cone with the whole twisty. So let's slide that over, select both of these things, just make a dotted line around them, and I have 5 objects selected because I have 4 of those and this one here. Now I'm going to line them up. We'll go center and center. So now it's lined up center and center, and check it from the top view. Now when I group these, it's going to cut that hole in there. Takes a little bit of time because it's a lot of shapes here. If you just align the hole and the solid cone, that's good enough, because when the STL file is uploaded, it'll know that that's a hole and it will actually cut into that shape anyway. But so this is, if your Chromebook is causing you issues with grouping them, you can leave it ungrouped. So now we need to take this cone here and we need to make this cone a hole to cut into our solid twist, our twisty solid, because we used our hole twist to cut a hole into the solid cone, and we take the solid cone and turn it into a hole to cut it into, to cut the solid twist. So I take this cone, I turn it into a hole, and then I bring out a box, and I'm going to make the dimensions of this box, I'm going to make it 30 by 30, 30 by 30, 30 millimeters by 30 millimeters, and it is going to be 62 millimeters tall. And I'm also going to drop it down that 4.99 millimeters. Now, the reason I'm doing that you drop it down, is to make sure, oops, I raised it, I need to do minus 4.99. The reason I do that, you do that, is to make sure the hole cuts into that whole entire shape over there, that it gets the bottom as well, just like our hole was long, to make sure it cuts into, that it gets everything, that it passes through everything. So we want to take this shape here and this shape, and we're going to select them both. So my box is already selected, shift and click, that will select both of them. 2 shapes are selected. Now I want to align them, and if I align right here, it just takes me right there, which is fine. But if I click on this one, then it moves the cone to here. If I click on this one, it's going to move the box to that way. I'm just going to align right here, right in the middle align, and right in the middle align. And we are going to group these 2 now. So now I have that cone, sorry, that box with a cone cut in the middle of it. So if I zoomed on the inside, see if this works. If I zoom into the inside, we see that we have a cone cut right into the middle of that box. So now I'm going to take this here, and I'm going to make this a hole. So I have my cone in the middle of that hole. Let's get back to a good view here. I'm getting kind of lost. And I'm going to group or align this and that. So I'm going to align, make sure those shapes are selected. And I'm going to align center and center. Align that center there as well. There we go. So now I have the cone around that twisty solid. Now I'm going to attempt to cut this, to group this I should say, and if you don't group this, you're fine stopping right there, because when I take the STL file, it will group them. So I'm going to select both of those things and group And that should cut that into a cone shape. After the holes are grouped, this is what you end up with here. And essentially these parts fit right together. If I can align them. Those parts fit right together. And when it's printed, one part will pass right through the other like a kind of twisty screw that slides right through each piece. So that is how to do this. Good luck.